I am going to talk about the teaching of the second arrow, which is a very famous teaching, a very famous sutta of the Buddha, the Salata Sutta, but one that, and something that I refer to all the time, but I just realized I never have given a Dharma talk on it. In all my years of teaching, I did a day long, but not a Dharma talk, and so I thought I'd do that. And basically, it's a teaching about how we relate to our feelings and our experiences, and whether we move into reaction or respond. And so I just want to read a little bit of the sutta. And it says, when touched with a feeling of pain, the ordinary person, the ordinary uninstructed person, meaning someone who's not familiar with the Dharma, who's not practicing the teachings of the Buddha, an ordinary uninstructed person sorrows, grieves, laments, beats his breast, and becomes distraught. So there's the physical pain, and then there's the reaction to the pain. There's the beating of the breast and the becoming distraught and the lamentation. So he feels two pains, just as if they were to shoot a man with an arrow and right afterward were to shoot him with another one, so that he would feel the pain of two arrows. So that's what we talk about when we talk about the second arrow. It's how we take something that may be uncomfortable and we intensify it because of our reaction to it. And it's about it goes right, it moves right along with the teaching of the first noble truth, which is that there is suffering in this world. We are all human beings. We all experience the human condition. There's birth, there's death, there's loss, there's sorrow, there's aging. There are all these things that cause discomfort, dissatisfaction, dukkha. And when we're not aware of that, when we're not holding that in our consciousness, we think oftentimes maybe we're doing something wrong, or why is this happening? And we fight against it. There's this automatic response, this aversion. And you think about it when you hit your elbow on the side of a dresser, and the immediate response is constriction and fighting against it. When if you actually stop and just let the pain be, it's a very different experience. Oftentimes it's not so bad at all. It subsides. And it's not just physical pain, but it's emotional stuff. When we hear news that's uncomfortable, or when somebody says something to us that's painful, we have the difficulty of the experience itself, and then the reactivity, which doubles down. And it's not always big things. It's not always like the death of someone or the loss of a job. Oftentimes it can be little small things. I wrote this talk the other day, and sometimes it's just small kitten pricks. And then like the next day, my cat used my face as a launching pad. And so I've got these big scratches down the side of my face. So I thought that was apropos. I could have screamed. I did scream, but all I did, but he just wanted to be on my back. And so I was just like, okay, you're just on my back. So I didn't intensify it by exploding and doing all this stuff, but it can be little things. It can be big things. And oftentimes when we're hit with the first arrow, whatever it is, there's a physical reaction. There's a physical response. It's a visceral kind of experience. If you think about it, when you do hear something that's really difficult or challenging, you hear about the death of someone, it's almost like, I know for me, oftentimes it feels like a kick in the gut. It's like, oh, you can almost feel it. But oftentimes we're not aware of that, that our chest is tight or our stomach feels like it's tied in knots. Instead, we try to mitigate the discomfort. We try and push it away. We try and do something to make it not be there. whatever it is, whatever our habitual patterns are, because this is what happens. We fall into these habitual patterns of respond or reacting, and we launch into the second arrow. If we are seeing clearly what's happening, it's like, oh, this is challenging. Oh, this is a really uncomfortable experience. And be with it, just as the invitation is in the meditation instructions. When we move through our lives and we have this continuity of mindfulness, we can be with it, but oftentimes we're not. We just react. And the second arrow can be so many different things. It can be blame. We blame others. We blame ourselves. Oftentimes we try and distract ourselves with something, taking away, try and push away the experience. We get angry. We have all kinds of responses based on, as I said, our conditioning. We're taught certain reactions, like it's not okay to be angry. Many of us learn that. Or you only have a certain amount of time to grieve and then you should be over it. Or how can you let that hurt you? Or sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words can be really, really painful when people get hurt all the time by words. And there's and based on, depending on who we are, what you look like, what your skin color is, who you love, where you come from, how you present in the world, it can be really painful. People can be really harsh, and it can be really painful, physically, emotionally. And so to recognize that, and we've developed ways of reacting to protect ourselves. And really, a lot of this stuff is a protection mechanism that we've developed to keep ourselves from being hurt and trying to mitigate the pain that we're feeling, because we don't want to feel pain. We want to feel comfortable. We want to feel pleasure, perhaps. And, but the second arrow always lets us down. When we chase something that takes us away from reality, I always like to say, we never win a fist fight with reality. It's always going to win. So it may be stuffed down, but it's going to come back at some place, sometime, perhaps when we least expect it. Like when they talk about the straw that broke the camel's back, it's like sometimes something happens and our reaction is so over the top, but it's because it's not related to what actually happened. It's like all this pent up emotion. So when we're, as the Buddha said, an uninstructed worldling, we chase this pleasure. This moves right into the second noble truth. The deep cause of our suffering is our craving for it to be good all the time. And that, I want to read another little piece of the sutta, the same sutta that talks about that. As he is touched by that painful feeling, that first arrow, he is resistant. Touched by that painful feeling, he delights in sensual pleasure. Why is that? Because the uninstructed, run-of-the-mill person does not discern any escape from painful feeling aside from sensual pleasure. There's no discernment. There's thinking it's either pain, it's this binary. It's either pain bad, pleasure good. And by that, I don't mean necessarily sensual pleasure, that it's around sex or anything, but just wanting it to be good, wanting it to be good smells and good thoughts and good emotions and good everything, which of course can't be. It's because that's not how the world operates. We walk into walls. We hurt ourselves. Relationships end. Loved ones die. Things happen. We're going to experience discomfort. And if we try and get rid of that feeling, that's a natural part of being a human being, we're going to shoot ourselves with the second arrow, whatever that arrow looks like for us. Bhikkhu Bodhi said that we are averse to pain and lust for pleasure. And pleasure, again, is one of those words like suffering. It's like, well, I don't suffer. It's like, no, but I'm really uncomfortable in my own skin. That's dukkha. That's why I like to use the word dukkha, because it has multiple translations, not just suffering, discomfort with the way it is. You know, and we lust for pleasure. So we chase something that's not painful. You know, so how do we get out of this? This cultivation of mindfulness. I wrote this: cultivating a patient, non-reactive, curious, and welcoming attitude towards anything in our experience that seems unpleasant. We're patient. Oh, this is happening. We're not reactive, letting it be. Curious, what is this? And welcoming. It's here. Let it be where it is. Let reality be. Joseph Goldstein said, we feel it, but we're not fettered by it. We feel the experience of discomfort. Perhaps we recognize the second arrow is coming up, but we're not overcome by it. And it's really helpful to begin to understand what the second arrow feels like, because all of us have different experiences of trying to not feel, or if something is going off kilter, we react in particular ways based on our conditioning. What does it feel like? I was talking the other day about this, and somebody said they recognized that their second arrow was this idea that they weren't good enough. And so if let's say you don't get a job, or a thought comes in, or somebody doesn't return your phone call, I mean, it can be that simple. And then somebody doesn't return your phone call, you don't get a job, a relationship ends, whatever it is. And then the story, the second arrow, I'm just not good enough. I'll be alone the rest of my life. I'll never find another job. I'm on the outside looking in. I'm unlovable. And that is an incredibly painful place to be lost in. That's what we talk about. That's what we mean when we say the second arrow. Mm-hmm. What happens when we don't meet expectations? Expectations that we've set for ourselves. I was talking to a friend recently who was used to love to work out all the time, and all of a sudden over the last several months he's lost his motivation, and he's like beating himself up because he should be doing this. When you have, always when you have those things that are should, that should be a red flag to stop and pause and investigate the should. Like it says, investigate. What is this? That's one of the 7 factors of awakening. The 7 factors of awakening, mindfulness. You got to have mindfulness, effort to really pause, recognize that you're lost in this type of thinking, and investigate what's going on here. Bring some curiosity. Is this true? Am I good enough, or is that just an old story? On the outside looking in, never fit in, whatever it is, we all have our own little stories that we are kind of trapped by. I heard somebody talking today too. I was in a group earlier, and somebody said they were just recognizing that they were trapped by these old stories. Oh, I can't do that. I was invited the other day. I was invited to moderate a panel on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia for the LA District Attorney's office. And A, I was honored, and B, the thought came up, you can't do that. You don't know what you're doing. How are you going to do that? Blah, 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 blah. All those stories, all those stories. But what I was able to do was recognize those stories. The first arrow was, I'm not doing that. And then I can't do that. And then, so that's the thought. And then recognizing the second arrow start to take me down that road, and instead just go, wait a minute, you don't have to do it today. You'll talk to people, you'll get some information, and you'll see what happens. And it'll unfold, and it'll be what it is. And so that is such a shift. This invitation to mindfulness, this invitation to pausing, this invitation to investigate and stop believing the stories. First, we recognize the story. Second, we're willing to let it go, and come back to what's right here, because the mind wants to kick in and mitigate discomfort in any way it can, even if it's not wise, even if it causes more pain, more discomfort. So we recognize those stories, that habitual second arrow, that path you always take, those fixed views, always should. Just, I was just talking to my friend the other day, just because you've always done something doesn't mean you're always going to do the same thing. Impermanence. Things change. Our interests change and shift. And how do we hold impermanence? Could be, impermanence can be really painful. Change can be really painful. How do we stay with that without blaming or yelling or getting down on ourselves or others? Are we willing to drop the story? And recognize, is this the first arrow or is this the second arrow? Is this legitimate discomfort? Or is this just me doubling down, intensifying it? I love the word papancha. In Pali, it means proliferation of thought, which is what the second arrow is. We have the first arrow. We hear something, we see something, we feel something, we think something. And then the reactivity kicks in. And then one story leads to the next story, leads to the next story, leads to the next story, and we're 1,000 miles away. That's that proliferation of thought. It's the second arrow, the third arrow, the fourth arrow, the fifth arrow, the sixth arrow. I mean, we got a whole quiver of arrows that we're just like poking ourselves with. And just intensifying the pain. But if we're willing to drop the story and just turn towards, are we willing to turn towards the experience? We're touched by the pain, we're touched by the difficulty, but we don't succumb. We recognize the second arrow perhaps, but we don't let it take over. When I think about this, I think about the image of Guan Yin, who is the bodhisattva. In Mahayana traditions, she's the bodhisattva of compassion, who hears the cries of the world, holds space for discomfort and pain, but isn't overcome by it. And that's what the invitation of this practice is. Can you be with this arrow, this dukkha, whatever it is in your life? There's a lot of dukkha right now. We have our personal dukkha. We have the dukkha of the world. That's a lot to hold. There's a lot. It's this what's going on in the world today is a lot to hold, and it has an impact, and to recognize that and to be gentle with that. That's the other piece. We are gentle with ourselves, because a lot of the lessons we're taught in this society is just keep on going. Doesn't matter. So what, just bear up, pull up your pants and just keep on going. You can do this. Don't let it bother you. All that silly stuff. Weakness is seen as, or not weakness, but, tenderness or feeling can be seen as a sign of a detrimental quality. But we have to recognize, we have to tend to ourselves. That's the only way we can be with the discomfort and the reality of the human condition. There's a lot of pain being a human being. There's also a tremendous amount of joy, so we can't lose sight of that either. We learn to recognize what's right here. And somebody reminded me yesterday of what I talk about all the time, the lens through which I see the world, the undefended heart. How do we open our hearts to our experience? How do we develop an intimacy with this moment that doesn't require us to run away or yell or blame or scream or go down that path of, I'm so awful? We have accountability for our actions. That's absolutely paramount. There's an very important ethical underpinning to Buddhist teachings, and we are accountable for when we cause harm, when we're unskillful in our speech or our actions. But we don't keep playing it over and over again. We say, I did this, maybe we make an apology, we make amends, whatever it is, and then we move on and set an intention not to do that. But how often do we sit there and go, I'm so awful, I'm a piece of shit, la 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 la, that replay, ruminate. And it's a miserable, we dig a hole in the ground for ourselves. And we bury ourselves. Sometimes it almost seems comfortable because we're so familiar with it. Years ago, somebody described, I would just go into self-pity, wallowing self-pity. It was a really comfortable place to be. And then at some point I recognized it, and I would find myself going down that road and going, it's actually not pleasant. Can I let it go? And can I instead just be with the discomfort? Be with the humanity that's right here. And what we want to do, as I said, to be tender, because this first arrow is uncomfortable. So can we bring compassion to this discomfort, to this pain? And sometimes you just offer yourself some gentle wishes, like from the compassion practice. May I be held in compassion, putting a hand on your heart or your belly, connecting with yourself in some way. May my pain and my sorrow be eased. May my heart be at peace. There's this invitation to gentleness, to warmth, to acknowledging the pain, to acknowledging the human condition, the loss that's just inherent with being a person. We are all of the nature to grow old, to sick and die. And everything we have will be taken from us. Everything will be lost. All we have are our actions. That can be really challenging. But to recognize it's not because we've done something bad or wrong. It's the human condition. So how do we make peace with that? How do we hold ourselves with gentleness and tenderness so that we can turn towards the challenges? Let our hearts break. Learn to become vulnerable. Learn to touch those things that we perhaps have been unwilling to touch most of our lives. That's part of this whole practice. That's part of the recognizing the first arrow, but saying no thanks to the second arrow, because it's optional. It's absolutely optional, but it takes work. It takes this willingness to look at, to see, and to be with So how can you be with discomfort? It's that mindfulness. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Where is it in my body? And then tend to it with that compassion. Letting go of the stories of if I had done it differently, I wouldn't feel this way. Just be with the reality and with tenderness. And what I want to invite you now, we just spend a couple of minutes and reflecting on how you shoot yourself with a second arrow. Just take a couple of moments. If you recognize any habitual stories, not good enough, unlovable, that can be so painful. We're constantly banging ourselves over the heads with them. The shoulds, the have tos, the if onlys. Watching those phrases that start so many sentences that can be so challenging, so unkind. We can be so unkind to ourselves. This is something else that came up yesterday when I was talking about this, was this second arrow is also how we talk to ourselves in our minds. And we have to treat ourselves kindly and using the teaching of wise speech. And the teaching of wise speech is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it the right time? And what's the intention? Is it a kind intention? You have to apply that in how you speak to yourself. You have to speak to yourself kindly. And that second arrow is never kind. So watching that too. Where do you pick up that second arrow with that harsh speech? Even the nicknames you have for yourself, which can be somewhat derogatory, but we can sometimes tend to laugh them off. You will be willing to let go of those. How can you be more kind to yourself around this? How can you be gentle with yourself around this? How can you open to the reality of the human condition, the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows that we're all heir to? And you open to each one of those, without needing it to be different. Greet the world with kindness. So thank you, my friends, for your kind attention. I'd love to hear about your second arrow, or any questions you might have, any thoughts. Well, I appreciate each and every one of you, and I appreciate your lovely attention. I appreciate seeing you here every time I get to share with y'all. And I invite you to, as I said, really see how this might show up in your life. It's as simple as, when you hit your elbow and letting go of that constriction. And Mira's put the information if you'd like to support us with Donna. That's an act of generosity to support both the teacher and the community. We really appreciate your support. And as was said before, we've got this Sunday afternoon class and the Tuesday evening, and then the Wednesday sit and the Friday metta. So all four are available every week. And then on April 20th, I'll be doing a half day at the Mizell Center in person. And I'm looking forward to that. It's always sweet to be, to sit together in person. So I look forward to seeing many of you there. Well, thank you so much, my friends, for being here. It's always a delight, and just a reminder that we don't just practice for our own benefit, but we practice for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free. Thank you all so much, everyone, and I will see you next time. Much love.